So today we're going to learn about splines to create this effect here and kind of understand how splines work. Because basically what a spline is that if I give you points in space, then Blender will draw a line based off of some sort of function between those points in space, and then you create a line. So what we will do is we'll start off with a just to visualize this, we'll start off with the distribute matrix. We'll make this 20. And then basically we're saying we now have 20 points in space. And I want to draw a line between each one of these points. And then we can manipulate that later. And it's going to be really interesting. So how we create a spline is we go to our spline menu, go into create from points, and we simply plug in a list of points. And now we've got our spline object right here. And you can see it's created out 20. But now what we do is we simply say, all right, now that we have this information of a spline, we need to output that information onto an object to manipulate. So we simply go into spline and object output. And we just hook up our spline that's made out of these 20 points right here into the spline object, create the object that will be manipulated by pressing this button, and then simply activate it. And now we've got a spline of 20 points in the size of 4 Blender units. So from here to here, 20 points. And what's interesting and fun about that is that you can manipulate the points. So if I do vector separate, then what I can do is I can create some sort of function, which the most common is a sine function. So a sine, I can take the sine of the x value and plug that in for the z value. We'll just simply do math sine, plug in the x value, and then we'll recombine these into a new vector. So we bring in the x to the x, y to the y, but the z value now will be tied to whatever the x value is, the sine value of that. And now we can get a wave. And then of course we can make this bigger so you can get more of a line, and we can increase the resolution. So that's the power with, if you want to create some sort of function in Blender and you want to be mathematical and beautiful. And of course, we can always add a value into this if we want to animate that as well. Might as well do it in case you were wondering how you do it. So we just put a math node in here. We would add something to it. And then we just put in a frame. And then as these go, it'll cycle through it. And you can, of course, manipulate this to slow it down or whatever. But that's how you can create a moving sine wave. So how do we create this effect here? Well, we're going to stick to we still need our distribute vector, because basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a spline, and we're going to create a bunch of different splines and then give them all a bunch of different points. And then bada bing, bada boom, we're going to create this. So what we want to do, instead of normally when we create multiple objects, we use an instancer, but splines are a little bit different. It's still the same thing, but at the exact same time, it's kind of not intuitive how you do this. So we're going to our spline menu. We're going to choose replicate, which makes sense, but at the same time, you'll see it doesn't make sense. So we're going to choose vectors, and this number right here is going to represent how many spline outputs we're going to use. So I'm going to set this to 0. I'm not quite sure what this does, and for the first time ever, I'm going to modify this when we're done. I've never actually, we'll see. We'll set this to 30 and plug this into our transformation. So now we have 30 splines, but with 0 points. So what we're going to do is we're going to loop through each one individually. And you don't need to eyedrop a point here because we're creating them from scratch. So don't worry about creating. You'd have to do this if you wanted to copy a specific spline, but we're not going to do that. We're going to create them from scratch. So now what we need to do is we need to create the points in space that we're going to connect with our splines. So what I want to do is I want them to move about like our effect. So I'm going to create a Boyd's particle system and have the Boyds fly around and move the splines with them. So what I need to do is create a sphere to have my Boyds, and then I'm going to create another sphere with Shift D, make that just a slightly bit bigger, and we're going to make that a collision object, and then we'll hide that so our Boyds don't fly off into nowhere. So now we go into our particle settings, turn on the particle system. We'll do like 150 on frame 1, lifetime, 1000, whatever. And then we change the physics to Boyds. And the only thing we need to do with Boyds is just turn on the brain and tell them to just keep moving and just wander about. And then we'll turn the speed down a little bit to like here. Now if we turn this into wireframe, we can see these guys just kind of fly about and do their thing, not hurting anybody. Okay, so now each one of these points or voids in space are a location, and we can retrieve that location. So we're going to go into our particle systems submenu, choose particle systems from object. We're going to click the eyedropper. We will then get the data from that particle system. And now we've got a list of all of these particles in space. As you can see, each one of those particles is a location in space. So now what we want to do is we just want to take 3 random particles from here and draw a line between them. So we can go to list, get random elements, and then plug our list in, and we'll say give us 3 random elements. And then this will spit out, here's 3 random locations from there. And we can go like that and get 3 random locations. So great. But the one thing is that I want these to be clamped on the end. So I want to start from this location and end at this location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bump up 1 extra for the start. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace the starting position with this location here. So we go to list and we do set element. So we plug in our list and we tell it which element. So in programming, 0 is always the first element. So we're going to say the very first element, I want it to be this location, which looks like it's -1, -2, -3. So we change that to -3. So now we've got a list of 4 vectors, and the first one is -3 followed by 3 random ones. And again, we can change this to get 3 random ones. Now what I want to do is I want to add at the very end of this point over here so they all come back together. So I will do list, and append in programming is when you add something to the end of a list. So, and this should be a mirror, so this would be +3. So now we look at our list. We've got something that starts from -3, goes through 3 random points, then comes back to +3. There we go. So now we've got everything we need. The only thing we need to adjust is just make sure each spline that goes through has a unique seed so they don't grab the same location. And then we need to combine all of these splines together into, well, first we got to create the splines. So we do create from points. So we take these 5 points and we tell it, draw a line between them. So it's going to go from -3 to this guy, to this guy, to this guy, to 3. It's always sequential. It's not random, the order for the spline. And then what we need to do is we need to say all of these splines, I need you to put them back together because we need to work with them. So we're going to do a new output, which is a little bit different. And we'll do splines list. And then we plug the splines list into here. So now if we look up here, we now have a list of 30 different splines, each with 5 points. So we need to, they exist now, the information exists. Now we have to create an object to use that information. And that's simply object output in the spline submenu. So now we say, here's the information, create this guy. So we activate that, and then we click this little button to actually create the object. And now we can see we've got, or we can go ahead and hide our sphere now. We can see we have these lines that exist starting from this point, going to 3 random points and converging here. And then we, of course, we want to smooth it out. So we go to our spline menu, go to smooth Bezier, plug that in. And then the power of animation nodes is I can press space and they will move about, and it looks really cool. So the main thing about, of course, let's bevel it so it looks a little bit better, more spaghetti-like. So the thing with animation nodes is it's about your imagination. Like, this serves a very small function. I could make this cyclic. In fact, let's do that. Let's just make like a big spaghetti ball. You can make a big spaghetti ball, and now you just have a ball of spaghetti. I don't know what you could do with this effect, but you just have to think about what you can do, how you can create points, and how you can make them look very interesting. And now that we're here, I just want to see what happens if we affect this. This doesn't appear to do anything. Okay, so don't worry about that. Stick it to 0 just in case. But it's your imagination. What you can think of is the effect that you can create. And of course, if I want to make this more spaghetti, I can increase the amount of random points to grab. So we can bounce this guy up to like that. And now you've got this crazy spaghetti ball. You can probably hide some meatballs in there if you wanted to create, like, I don't know, Cloudy with a chance of meatballs effect or whatever. So again, that's how splines work. You give it points, it will draw a line between those points. It will do it in the order of the list, and make it cyclic, and you got a spaghetti ball.